So is this build salvageable if Chris Greer does end up losing his job at the end of the season? And let's just say, hypothetically, McDaniel stays, Tua obviously is going to stay. Is this build salvageable, Bees? Does a general manager come in and would he be able to either through the draft, this upcoming draft, and through the offseason, make this roster, put it where it needs to be? Or do you anticipate, a new GM comes in and it's kind of a full rebuild in terms of how the roster has been constructed?
I do think full rebuilds are a little overblown because every year there is significant turnover, right? And they're going to be, I think, one of the 7 or 8 most cap-strapped teams in the National Football League next year. They're not going to be a real rich team where they can go out and solve all their problems. I would start with trading Tyreek Hill. I think that is where you begin this process because we have now basically 50 games of data that tells us that Tyreek Hill, Tua Tagovailoa, and Jalen Waddle combined have a very hard ceiling, right? And of those 3, there's really only one you can trade. Can't trade Tua. Waddle just got his contract. He's the younger of them. And I know he hasn't had a great season. Injuries were tough for him this year. I still think he has a ton of upside. We may have seen the best of Tyreek Hill, right? And so I think of those 3, what are you going to be okay not building around? Tyreek's one of them. You take some of that money off your cap, you're able to do some things, maybe get an asset. They're not like I wrote it back in October. They screwed up. They believed they got high on their own supply, so to speak. They believed that they had enough to make a run, even though they were 2-6, which was crazy for them not to, pull the plug right then and go on and trade a bunch of these assets away. And so they're not going to get the most return they could have gotten Tyreek, like 2 months ago or whatever it was. But they can still get something for Tyreek. I would do that. I would significantly.
You think, by the way, his lack of production has a lot to do with himself, right? That's what I got from reading what you wrote today about Tyreek. Well, it's not just a quarterback unable to get him the ball. Like you were critical of him.
Yeah, I mean, look what Derek Stingley did to him yesterday. I mean, like I know McDaniel post game kind of brushed it aside, but. Like the next gen stats are real. He couldn't get open yesterday. And that to me is stunning. Like if Stingley locked him down, okay? What's the point then, right? What is the point of having a $30 million receiver who can't even get you a jump ball, right? I know he's done lots of things really well. The best of Tyreek Hill is incredible. 1,700 yards in back-to-back seasons. You cannot say anything about that. But I will say this. How many of those yards and touchdowns were impactful? How many of them won them games against very good teams? Is that a $30 million investment you have there? Are you going to continue to go down that road when you've seen you need to diversify your offense? Like, I would much rather take Tyreek's money and get 3 starting offensive linemen. I think if you're asking me what will have a bigger impact on the production of this team, picking up 3rd and 1's a lot more important to me than the occasional go route, right? Like, they can't pick up a 3rd and 1. I think it's largely because of the construction of their roster. So, yeah, no, I it's, I don't want to be too harsh, but I do think the best days of Tyreek Hill are behind him. I think that we have seen, and again, the peak is incredibly high. He's a Hall of Fame player. Like he at his very best, he was as good as we've seen in the National Football League. Very, very good player. I just think that what we saw this year, what we saw, in key moments the last 3 years, they can do better with their roster than having all that money tied up in one player.